Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your own parts for your own motorhome out of fiberglass. So we're on our second week of lockdown now, and obviously trying to find things to keep us busy and what have you. Luckily I turned the garage into a workshop, so we've got a nice big workshop to work out. I've got another external garage outside that I do all my fiberglassing as well, because I can't do the fiberglassing inside. So I'm going to carry on with a project that I started a couple of weeks prior to the lockdown, which is this. This is a front splitter, and it's the first kind of exterior body styling type of thing that I've done, and it's going to be it goes on the front, underneath the front bumper of Citroen Dispatch, Peugeot Expert and the Toyota Pro Ace. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you the process up to now, because I haven't videoed any of this yet, but I'll show you how the process I've took to this point, and then when we get to that point we'll carry on with this and we will create our mould off this one. So there are different techniques that you can use for making a fiberglass mould. I've seen people use plastics, paper, plywood, MDF, even cardboard, foam, all sorts of different ways of making a mould. I tend to stick to a certain few. I've got the MDF, I've used plywood, I've used some Formica as well, which I'll show you in a second on some of the other stuff that I've done. But I use this for a few different reasons. It's quite soft, and it's good to use different router bits on to get some different shapes on the corners and things like that. It's easy to sand, it's easy to cut, and obviously gluing pieces together is very easy as well because it's quite porous. But that is another reason that you've got to make sure that the preparation work is right. When you've made the shape that you want, you've got to seal it with this MDF sealer. You can brush it on, you can put it on with a sponge, and I'll be honest with you, putting it on with a sponge you're probably going to get a better result, because you can get the brush strokes with a brush, which you're going to end up sanding out and things like that. So once you've made the piece that you want in, and I'll show you again in a second with some of the other pieces I've got, you've got to seal it with that, and I recommend probably 2 or 3 coats. So you put one coat on, rub it down, put another coat on, rub it down, and put a final coat on. You can, if you want, polish that up at that point, because it is a nice surface to get a good finish on. But on other parts that I've done, I've always tended to paint it. If, when you're sanding down, you've not got the actual finish that you want, I have got, and I have used, a high build primer. Once you spray that on, you can rub that down, and any little imperfections that are in that mould that you've made, or the plug should I say that you've made, will come away with this. You get a good result. So just to run through a few examples of the kind of techniques that you can use. This one in particular, this was made out of fiberglass. Now this is, you've probably seen it on some of my other videos in the showers. This is the sink front that goes under the corner sink in some of the conversions I've done. And this was relatively quite an easy thing to make actually. Once I'd made the front, as you can see, I've got the front there, that's how it would sit. The sink goes inside there. So I've got the shape at the front of that sink, and I made a plywood mould for that. And what I did from there, as you can see, I put a strip of Formica on the top of that. So the finish is actually it was perfect basically. It's exactly the kind of finish I want, nice and glossy. And that's the mould. That's how the moulds come off. So I've used to place that on there. That's the way around, looks like. It's a perfect fit. So that comes off, but that is what the product will look like, the white one. So this is the mould. I always do my moulds in quite a vibrant colour, usually orange, so you can tell how thick the gel coat is going on and things like that. But yeah, that's one of them, and it got a really good result from a Formica piece off that as well. Okay, so a few examples of plywood moulds, or plugs that I've made, should I say. This one here, we moved on to, in fact, I'll show you part of the video whilst this is going. We needed a fuel filler for the Citroen Blingo that was developing a new venture. And the one that it came with, the new one that came with the AdBlue filler, was a rubber housing, should I say, and it weren't strong enough to hold the actual filler on the side of the vehicle, so we needed something new to be made. So this is one I've made out of plywood. As you can see, it's plywood, it's had the sealer on, and this has still got its PVA release agent on. As you can see, I'll show you that stuff in a minute. So I've got that nice and smooth, put a few layers on of the sealer, the MDF sealer that I showed you, rub that down. Probably did about 3 or 4 attempts on this, or 3 or 4 applications on this one to get it nice and smooth. And then this is what came out, the actual mould. As you can see, we've got a nice glossy finish on that. These 2 holes here are there to pop the mould off basically, so we can break off around the edges once the product's made, and then to actually release it. These are like class of blow holes. You pop through with the compressor and it pops off. And all you need to do for these is just add some parcel tape over these holes, and that stops the gel coat going through. So that's one of them. That's one of the plywood patterns. Let's move this to one side. One of the other ones that we made, and this really didn't get used properly in the vans. This was one of them. I know it doesn't look much to look at the minute, but it was made out of plywood. It did have the sealer on. I did have some imperfections, like I was telling you about, when you can't rub it down properly. So I put some high build primer on, and that's what's come off on the actual thing. But that was made out of ply. That's the mould that came out, which got polished off, and then this is the actual product that comes from it. So as you can see, it's a direct finish. Now this was to replace the actual curved corner sink, because on some models it would protrude too much into the shower tray. This was a lot narrower, about 3 or 4 inches narrower, but obviously wider that way, but it did give you that option of having a corner sink. There is another one of them that I've made, a slightly bigger one, but I've not gone too far with that one at the minute. So yeah, as you can see, you've got the options of plywood. Move these to one side again. There was another one that we had. No, I haven't got the mould for this one, the actual plug for this one, but this was the mould that we had. And this was basically to box in the corners of the vehicles. It was more used in the motorhomes, but it was made out of plywood. So the biggest projects I've taken on was to make a fiberglass roof for a Fiat Doblo, long wheelbase Fiat Doblo, and that was for the conversions that I was making on the micro campers.
Unfortunately, I didn't video the process of making this roof, but luckily I did take some photographs along the way. This mould was the original one that I took off the factory high top long wheelbase Fiat Doblo, but it did have the doors that went up to the roof, so this is where the plywood came in to bridge that gap. Now once all this was prepared or waxed, this is when the first layer of gel coat went on, and this was actually making the first product. And then after that we move on to the resin and the matting. This was left to cure overnight, and once this was released from the mould, the result was brilliant. All the preparation work from the polishing and the waxing, and it came out absolutely fantastic, better than I could have expected. Now was the time to make a mould that would produce future roofs. This was being done via a split mould and using red tooling gel coat so that the mould will last. After the tooling gel coat had dried, the resin and the matting were applied, and we finally have our mould to produce future roofs.
So, back to the product that we started with originally, the front splitter. This has now been painted. As you can see, I've got a nice finish on this with the gloss paint. It saves me a lot of work having to polish up and things like that. So this is fully dry now, fully cured. So what I'm going to do now, it's going to need some filleting wax on around the edges to stop that gel coat going underneath, preventing it to release. And it's going to need a few layers of wax. So I'm going to set the camera up, we'll do a time-lapse video on that, and we'll take a look at that one. Okay, as you can see, I've got the filleting wax all the way around the edge of this splitter now. So that stops the gel coat locking in underneath that gap and allows the piece to release afterwards. That's all the way around. Okay, so now that we've got that sorted out, we're now going to be on to actually waxing this plug. People do it differently again. Some people put the wax on and leave it. Some people wax it on, wipe it off, wax it. They probably do that process 4, 5, maybe 6 times, and then they'll add another PVA release agent. There's different types of waxes. These are 2 examples. Honeycomb one, I've used this one before, and I've also used the Meguiar's Mirror Glaze. Now, as a personal preference, I actually prefer the Meguiar's Mirror Glaze. It gives me a lot better finish when it comes to buffing up and getting that nice shine, whereas this one, not so much. But it does do the job, but I do get a better finish from the Mirror Glaze. This is the other type of release agent you've got, the PVA liquid stuff. So you can put that on with a brush, or again with a sponge. You get a lot better finish with a sponge with that. But I don't tend to use this on a product like this because I've got such a nice finish with the gloss paint. I'll just use the Mirror Glaze on this. I'll probably put 3 or 4 coats of this on now. I won't be using this. I only tend to use this when it's one of the other molds that I show you, when it's a raw piece out, when there's plywood involved and it's on show. So I'm going to leave that to one side for the minute. So we'll set the camera up again and we'll get to waxing. Okay, so this has had 5 coats of Meguiar's Mirror Glaze release wax, mould release wax. It's got a really nice shine to it now. It's exactly what I want basically. There's 1 or 2 imperfections which I'm not going to actually alter on this one. I'm going to alter it on the actual mould when it comes off. It's going to be easier that way because that's going to need buffing up as well. So now we are ready for the gel coat. I've got some clear gel coat here, ready to go. I've estimated with jobs that I've done before, I think I need about 18 fluid ounce of this, but I'm going to do 20 just to be on the safe side because I need to get a nice edge on this, and all this has been waxed to the edge. So I'm going to give myself probably about 2 inch all the way around so the mould stays nice and straight. So I'm going to put about 20 fluid ounces on that. Means I need 10% of this tangerine pigment, which is 2 ounces of that, so that gives me a total of 22 fluid ounce, and I want 2% of the hardener, the activator, which is 0.4 fluid ounce. So that's my mixes. I'm going to set the camera up. I'm actually going to take this outside. I'm going to set the camera up and we'll do a time lapse of putting the gel coat on.
It's very important to get the right quantities when mixing either gel coat or resins together, so I always use scales. This is a money saving tip that I actually learned from another YouTuber, which is to use an empty cleaned out milk pot, cut the bottom off and you've got an excellent mixing pot. So I'm going to be adding 20 fluid ounces of this clear gel coat into the pot. Once I've done that, I'm going to be adding 10% of the pigment, which is 2 fluid ounce of the orange tangerine coloured pigment, giving me a total weight of 22 fluid ounces. Now once you've got the required amounts, it's extremely important that this is mixed thoroughly, making sure that all the edges are scraped around and making sure everything is mixed properly. Now once you're happy with the mix, it's now time to add the hardener. Now going off the amounts that we have, 22 fluid ounce, we calculated we've got a 0.44 of fluid ounce of hardener that we need to add, and it's the same process again, mixing thoroughly, making sure that you get all the edges scraped down as well, making sure you get every part mixed together. Now the last thing I check before applying the gel coat to the product is to make sure there's no loose bristles in the brush before you start. and give that gel coat one last mix with the brush. When applying the gel coat, try and get it as evenly as possible all over the product. And what I'm doing with this one as well, I'm creating an extra flange around the product to give it some strength when the mould is finished. After I finished gel coating, I realised that I had quite a lot of gel coat left over, so I decided to weigh what was left. And there was 6 fluid ounces left over, meaning I could have got away with the 14 ounce in the beginning.
Okay, so we are the next day. This now has fully cured. It's touch dry, as you can see. I've just been going around the edges to see if the wax that I've put on, the mould release wax, has been working. And there's certain parts of it that will release, so I'm happy with that to carry on, to go on with the resin and the matting. This is the end of part 1. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen so far. If you've got any questions or you want to see something in part 2, let me know in the comment section down below, and I will do my best to include that for you. Secondly, I'd like to thank my camera woman, my daughter Georgia, who's only 9. It's her first time at operating the camera, so while we're on lockdown and everything else, she wanted to get involved and help me with the videos. So say hello, Georgia.
Hello.
Say hello.
Hello.
Okay, that is the end of part 1. I hope you're all staying safe and healthy. Many thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye bye.